What is up, my YouTube family? It's Arrahaffv, the only the 7-letter king, whatever you want to call me. And today, welcome to a new series on the channel called Stats and Facts Versus. Now, on this series, we'll be putting two characters or more against each other, and we will be reviewing their stats. We will be reviewing their facts to see who would factually win in a battle. Now, today, I wanted to do a specific battle that I kind of mentioned in the previous video, and that is Ichigo versus Uryu in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Now, the reason this came to be is in the trailer, we kind of saw some snippets of what it looked like to be a battle between the two. Now, these two characters have had a little scuffle in the manga before Uryu's fight with Arrahaffv, but besides that, they haven't had an actual complete battle. So, I will be putting it in my own hands to scale these two and kind of show the public why this fight isn't really as close as you think it is. Now, starting off how we're going to do this, we're going to rank each stat of each character, meaning we're going to start off with speed, then strength, then durability, stamina, so on and so forth with Ichigo, and then we'll do Uryu. So starting off with speed for Ichigo, it's very apparent to me, or any Bleach fan, or just anime fan in general that would do their research, that Ichigo at this point in the series is beyond, even maybe far beyond light speed. Now, if you need reference as to why, we have multiple references throughout mangas, light novels, and manga adaptations. For instance, the Arrahaffv feat, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I know I am, but I honestly don't know how to pronounce it correctly. Now, hollows in the Bleach anime have been stated both in the manga and anime to be the speed of sound. And obviously, Arrahaffv absorbing 3,000 of said hollows is a fairly impressive feat. But does that actually make him 3,000 times the speed of sound? Probably not necessarily, but it does improve his speed past those levels. And we know that in Ichigo's fight with Byakuya at this point in the series is a master of Kido and owns the Kido that wields literal lightning. And he's even impressed by Ichigo's speed, probably putting Ichigo past lightning speed, obviously. Not to mention weaker characters in the series showing even better feats, such as Shunsui in the Soul Society arc, showing to dodge the Nagashionne, which is literally said to be a beam of light by Yamamoto himself. And other feats such as Nanao dodging and tagging the X-axis light attacks, which are literally said to be light multiple times and implied that way by Kubo himself. Also, Orihime even being fast enough to react to attacks from Ukiura and protect Ichigo from them, and doing the same in the fight with Yuha. Now, I'm obviously not saying Orihime has the reaction speed of somebody like Ukiura or Yuhaba, but the fact that she was able to do that is fairly impressive. Not to mention that going back to the Arrahaffv feat, Arrahaffv is arguably one of the weaker, if not weakest, espadas, and most espadas are stronger than him. Espadas like Grimmjow. Grimmjow, being significantly stronger and faster than Arrahaffv, was overpowered and defeated in his Resurrection by a full Hollow Mask Bankai Ichigo. Now, we know that Resurrections act just like Bankais, so that would narratively imply that they times any stats by 10. So if we're putting that straight to math, then that would times all of Arrahaffv's stats at least by 10, and that's lowballing. And Ichigo was even able to overcome and defeat this power. Ukiura being someone that's even stronger than Ichigo at that point in the series, making base Ukiura equally as strong as Resurrection Grimmjow, which would narratively make sense. Ukiura being a character that also gets stronger after his first awakening, timesing his powers by another 10. And then also having a second awakening that times his powers by yet another 10. And Vasta Lorde Ichigo was even able to humble this form of Ukiura.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Come here, boy!
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Hey, bro, watch your jet. Watch your jet, bro. Watch your jet!
Which, as you can imagine, as far as speed feats go, is fairly impressive. Because at this point in the series, we are multiple times faster than light. It was said by Grimmjow himself in his first fight with Ichigo that Ichigo's Bankai multiplied his physical stats times 10, which was similar to how Resurrections worked for espadas. But they also multiplied their powers times 10 as well. So this would in turn multiply all of their physical stats, including reaction speed, times 10. So having a reaction speed that's faster than light and timesing it by 10, obviously you get the point. Not to mention other lesser feats like Ichigo just casually blitzing the Bambis who dodged Ashvalen Light. Ashvalen Light literally being said to be a beam of light sent down by Yuhaba that literally no other Quincy's that it was aimed at was able to dodge. So even if you don't go by the whole Quincy's are light meta way of power scaling, that's still a fairly impressive feat. But if you do go by that meta, then technically all Quincy arrows are made of light. And this wouldn't be too far out there considering that is the way it works in most fiction. Now most people's argument against this is that Quincy's use reishi into the form of light, so it's not technically light. But my argument against that would be it kind of works the same way as something like mana would work in Black Clover. For instance, light magic. You're forming mana into light, but once you have formed it into the light, it becomes pure light. Therefore, making light magic light, just created by mana. And I feel reishi works the same way. But again, if you think that's a stretch, there are still multiple implications throughout the entire series that at the final arc of the entire series, Ichigo is much faster than the speed of light. Now we get to Ichigo's strongest suit most likely, and that's power. Now obviously we can start off with Ichigo's Soul Society scalings, in him being able to block 3 million Zanpakutos in his Shikai, obviously saving Rukia's life. Now I would just like to very quickly go back to my previous point in the fight against Grimmjow. Grimmjow introduced into the series is bodying Bankai Ichigo. Now Ichigo, having trained a little and gained more control over his hollow mask, comes back to fight Grimmjow again, in a fight where this version of Ichigo easily overpowers base form Grimmjow. Grimmjow then activates his Resurrection, which times his powers by 10, which we previously just went over. Ichigo in his Hollow Mask transformation Bankai still overpowers this version of Grimmjow. Now I do want to go over a quick scaling that's used fairly often in Bleach scalings, and that's the Gran Recero. Now the Gran Recero is stated by Aizen himself to be enough power to destroy all of Hueco Now if you use what most people use as the scaling of Hueco which is Texas, then we can scale it that way. Now if we know a Resurrection makes the character stronger and times their powers by 10, then it would naturally times their Gran Receros by 10 as well. I bring this up to mention the Ulquiorra fight, where again Ulquiorra has 2 transformations, one his first awakening and 2 his second. Now we know his first awakening is timesing his power by 10, and then his second is timesing it by another 10. And we could probably assume that Ulquiorra is already 10 times of what Grimmjow's Resurrection was, just of how easily he was handling an Ichigo who had just defeated that same Grimmjow. That leaves us with 10 times 10 times 10, which means Ulquiorra in his final transformation would be able to destroy 1,000 times the size of Hueco, or in layman terms, 1,000 times the size of Texas, which will come out to be somewhere around 695 million square kilometers. Not to mention that Ichigo in his Vastalorde form absolutely drags this version of Ulquiorra. Ulquiorra even using his Cero Oscuro, which is also stated to be at least 10 times stronger than his regular Cero, which is another 10 times stack, and Ichigo casually blocks it with one hand.
Impossible. You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
And in the Hellverse movie, we also see him just blatantly overpowered with his own beam. Now with just these scalings alone, you could obviously just come to the conclusion that this version of Ichigo is 10 times stronger than that version of Ulquiorra. And even if you do think that's highballing, I can lowball it to maybe 5 times, and that's still a lot. Now I would just like to bring up fairly quickly that Ulquiorra's feat of 695 million square kilometers is fairly impressive when you layman in the fact that Earth's square kilometer size is 510 million, casually putting final form Ulquiorra above planetary level. And obviously Vastalorde being at least 5 times stronger than this puts him at planetary level as well. Therefore, at this point in the series, in just the Arrahaffv arc, Ichigo is already reaching planetary levels of strength. Now I know what people are probably wanting me to mention, and that is his Dangai / Final Getsuga Tencho form, but I will not be mentioning it in this video just because it would not be very useful to this fight at all. Ichigo, for one, cannot use it, and for two, would have no reason to use it. And I kind of want to make it its own video as well, discussing the transformation, so we won't use it for this particular scaling. Now just for those who are maybe confused as we move along here and want more solid numbers, if we are saying that Vastalorde is 10 times what Ulquiorra's feat was, that would put Vastalorde's feet at 6,900,000,000 square kilometers, which as you could imagine is a fairly impressive feat of strength. And when you also factor in that Yamamoto himself said that the Vasto Lorde was planetary level in the Hellverse movie, it just makes the evidence more solid. Not to mention that the Vasto Lorde was able to release a Cero that destroyed all of Hell to the point where it broke the chains of Hell and even crossed over into the real world. Said chains were said by Yamamoto himself, who is also casually a planetary level threat, saying that the chains could not be broken or cut. Now, I'm obviously not saying that Vasto Lorde is stronger than Yamamoto at this point in the series, but it is a fairly impressive feat. And when you factor this also with the point that base form War Arc Ichigo is at least 10 times stronger than the Vasto Lorde, not to mention his True Shikai, not to also mention his Bankai, that's 3 10-time stacks onto the power he already had, already putting Ichigo far beyond planetary level. Now, I won't blow the ball out of the park here and say it's multi-planetary level or even universal level like most would, but it wouldn't be an out there assessment to say. And honestly, all of the stats would back that and say it's factual. But again, for the sake of this argument, I won't. Also, it is narratively implied by Kubo himself that a Cero does make the user stronger, and using a few guidebooks and light novels along the way, we can calculate that this is also about somewhere around a 10 times power boost. So when you factor in the fact that Ichigo's True Shikai also has the ability to use a Cero, that's just another 10 times stack onto what Ichigo already has. I think it's safe to say without question at this point in the series that Ichigo is beyond planetary level and beyond light speeds, obviously making his stats fairly impressive. Now we move on to stamina. Ichigo has very just blatant feats of stamina, nothing too crazy, but crazy enough to make it useful in this fight, like him fighting for months upon a time. Also factoring in the fact that he fought technically 3 to 4 Espada all in the same span of time without taking a break once. I'd say he's got some pretty decent stamina. And when it comes to durability, all you really need to look at again is his fight with Ulquiorra, and just take Ulquiorra's stats of durability and his own stats of durability and all the 10 times multipliers and you get your answer. Not to mention that he becomes significantly stronger than this as the series continues, especially in the War Arc. So you just add more 10 times multipliers and it gets very self-explanatory. Now we get to the part of this video that's going to be a little bit more difficult to do, and that's Uryu's side. And I know you're probably wondering, well, why? You just do the same system you did with Ichigo. And although yes, that is true, it's not that simple. You see, Uryu is introduced into the series to be kind of the Sasuke to Ichigo's Naruto. And for the first few episodes, seasons, maybe even arcs, that is definitely the case. But as the series continues, he kind of falls out of that role as there becomes more characters who can actually fill it. For instance, somebody like Renji or Byakuya or Kenpachi could all easily fill that role. And Uryu kind of gets just left in the back foot, which is actually kind of a trend with the original Ichigo team. Chat. I bring this up to say that Uryu for the most part kind of peaked in the Soul Society arc. And obviously he gets stronger after this arc, but as far as solid stats, that's kind of all we really have to go off of. And what I mean by this is he doesn't really have any solid one-on-one fights after the Soul Society arc, except for the one we're going to get to later on in this video. But starting with the Soul Society arc, we see him fight Mayuri. In a fight where I'd like to mention he comes out victorious, which is actually fairly impressive when you layman in the fact that no other member of Team Ichigo was able to do that. So you could actually argue that at this point in the series, Uryu is the strongest member of Team Ichigo. Now I know what you're thinking, well, Ichigo tied with Kenpachi. Not necessarily. We obviously learn later on in the series that Kenpachi purposely lowers himself to his enemy standards to make battles more fun for him. AKA, he made his powers as weak as Ichigo's at that time to make his fight with Ichigo a lot more fun and entertaining for him. So Ichigo at that point in the series wasn't actually fighting a full power Kenpachi, he was literally just fighting a Kenpachi that was equally as strong as him. And even then he wasn't able to pull out the victory. So it's actually very fair to say at this point in the series that Ulquiorra is actually the strongest member of the team. Unfortunately, this all falls off after the training arc. And by training arc, I obviously mean Ichigo's training arc to get his Bankai, in which he does and becomes the strongest character in his own team, reasonably so. Unfortunately, this is kind of where the fall off of Uryu begins. He doesn't really do much of anything in the Arrahaffv arc. He does have a fight with Xyloparo along with Renji, but it's hard to take away any stats from that fight when you layman in the fact that he's fighting with another person, so it's hard to say if those all are his stats or if they're just his stats alongside Renji. Not to mention that he does actually end up losing this fight after Xyloparo activates his Resurrection. Obviously not a very good look for my boy.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no.
Now he does later have a little altercation with Ukiura where he, as you would imagine, does absolutely nothing. He tries his best but ends up getting folded in the end, as Uryu usually does.
Look at this dude. Wait till you see the. No, 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 no.
So just for the sake of this scaling, we will say that Uryu has at least the same stats as the Ichigo before he fought Ukiura when it comes to speed. As we know, speed is kind of one of the Quincy's fortes. But all of the stats, or almost all of the stats that I use for Ichigo would also apply to Uryu as well, such as the Arrahaffv stats, the Byakuya stats, the Shamsui stats, and some of the Espada stats. So I'd say at this point in the series, it's safe to say that Uryu is past light speed, just not as far past it as Ichigo is, when you consider the fact that Ichigo at this point in the series is multiple times faster than light, whereas Uryu probably is just faster than light. And then we get to the next arc, which is the Fullbring arc, where Uryu does next to absolutely nothing. He's basically in cardiac arrest the entire season, and that's about all of his contribution.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
He only really comes back with more stats in the War arc. Now you'd think with Uryu being such a vital piece to this arc, he'd have a lot of fights and a lot of stats. Unfortunately, that is not the case. In fact, Uryu only has one actual full fight in this arc, and it's not even actually animated or even drawn. Now you could attribute this to Kubo's sickness, him having to rush through the end of the series, in which case you would be correct. But that doesn't change the fact that we don't get much stats from this fight at all. But what Uryu does lack for in stats, he does make up for in ability. Because in this fight, we see Uryu use one of the most broken abilities in the entire series. The Antithesis. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but if I am, please don't hold it against me. Now what this ability specifically allows Uryu to do is trade damage with any opponent he's fighting. So say an opponent were to slice him across the chest and it left a huge gash. He would be able to use this ability and completely heal himself, and now his opponent would be the one with the gash on their chest. A fairly broken ability. And yes, this would help him a lot in the fight with Ichigo, but not enough to win. And here's why. A lot of the scaling that we use for Ichigo as far as power, we just cannot use for Uryu. For instance, Ichigo fights an Espada that is significantly stronger than the one Uryu fought, and Uryu had help with that Espada and still lost. Not to mention Ichigo goes on to fight yet another Espada even stronger than the last one he fought, that being Ukiura, and still came out on top. And Ichigo's stats after this point only go up and up and up and get stronger and stronger and stronger. Uryu just doesn't have the strength stats, or I should say power stats I guess, to match up with somebody like Ichigo. Ichigo is very blatantly and obviously hitting beyond planetary level feats, whereas Uryu just doesn't have those same feats to back him up. But where Uryu really falls short is his durability feat. You see, his ability is really broken, but it's much like Vegeta's Ultra Ego, and where Vegeta gets stronger the more damage he takes, but Ultra Ego doesn't actually help him as far as durability or defense. And what I mean by this is basically, although his attacks are very effective, and although his ability is very effective, he has to take a lot of damage for it to be very effective. And I just don't see him taking blatant Seros or blatant just regular Getsuga Tenshos from a true Shikai Ichigo and surviving it. The best we could say for Uryu's durability feats is him being able to fight Hashwall for an entire night, which is fairly impressive, but when you layman in the fact that Ichigo was able to go head to head with somebody like Yhwach, who is just blatantly stronger than Hashwall, then that stat gets a lot less impressive. And it gets even less impressive when you layman in the fact that Ichigo was actually the person to get the last shot against him. Now I know Ichigo's Bankai is a very controversial topic in Bleach for reasonable reasons. It doesn't really do anything, but at the very least we can say that it multiplies his powers by 10 by the basic math of Bleach. So that would multiply his true Shikai stats times 10 a second time, and I honestly don't think Uryu would make it by true Shikai anyway. True Shikai is just hitting beyond planetary levels of power and beyond light levels of speed, stats that Uryu just simply does not have. Yes, if Uryu were to sustain an immense amount of damage and then bring it back upon Ichigo, that would be fairly effective. But there's nothing to say that he would survive taking that damage anyway. I mean, imagine True Shikai Ichigo hits Uryu with a beyond planetary level Zero. Uryu has shown no feats to support that he'd be able to survive that at all. Now, just for the sake of argument, let's say that Uryu does make it past True Shikai and makes Ichigo use his Bankai. Now, let me just point out that I highly doubt this would be the case, but again, just for the sake of argument, let's assume. The only real feat that Ichigo's Bankai has is one-shotting a multi-dimensional level being. So even though it does have a low list of feats, its one feat that it does have is fairly impressive. Now I know what you're probably thinking, how does this feat apply? Well, it applies in that it would be able to easily one-shot Uryu. Now the question is, do you think Uryu can activate his ability Beyond Death? AKA, do you think he'd be able to activate the antithesis and repair his body together and Ichigo actually be the person cut in half? Now I don't see this honestly being the case, because it just sounds very unrealistic. For instance, if Hashwolf were to cut off Uryu's arm and he were to use the effect, would his arm heal and then Hashwolf's arm be cut off? I mean, honestly, if you want to highball Uryu, I guess you could say that it would cut Ichigo's body in half as well, it just wouldn't heal his. In which case, it would end up a draw. So even high scaling Uryu to the roof, the best he could pull out of this fight is a draw. He just doesn't have the basic stats in either speed or strength to overpower Ichigo. Ichigo is just blatantly faster than him and blatantly stronger than him and blatantly more durable than him. So with this being said, it would be difficult for Uryu to even land a hit on Ichigo. Now, am I saying that Uryu wouldn't be able to land a hit on Ichigo in this fight? Absolutely not. But am I saying it'd be incredibly difficult for him to land a finishing blow? Absolutely. In fact, it'd be nearly impossible. With that being said, I think it's safe to say that this fight just isn't as close as it would seem. Although Uryu is meant to be the Sasuke to Ichigo's Naruto, I doubt the fight would actually be as close as that one was. So in conclusion, according to the stats and according to the facts, Ichigo takes Uryu and your victor is Ichigo Kurosaki, with mid to high difficulty if you're high scaling Uryu. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, as always, feel free to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comment section down below any other fights y'all would like to see me do in the future. I plan on continuing this series for a very long time, so if you do like this style of content, make sure to let me know, because I'm down to do a lot more of it. And I'm honestly probably going to do a lot more of it anyway. But with that being said, if you did enjoy this, make sure to subscribe and check out the previous videos on this channel and be waiting for the next one to come out. I've been your host that does the most from coast to coast, Arrahaffv, son of Arrahaffv, and it's me, y'all. Peace and out. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.